a holiday feast turns into a battle for dignity when my in-laws push my allergies aside year after year until I finally invite them all to my home. I planned the menu, set the table, and kept a secret simmering beneath every dish. By the end of the meal, I wasn't the outsider anymore, and the family's matriarch would never see me the same way again. What really happened when I served my fake food for Christmas? Find out in my most personal confession yet. I always thought being part of a big family during the holidays would be a dream. Growing up, it was just me and my mom. Small meals, quiet evenings. No chaos. No big tables crowded with casseroles and chatter. So when I married Jake, I looked forward to his family traditions: turkey carved by Grandpa, kids ripping into presents, too many pies on the counter. I thought I was finally going to belong somewhere loud and full. But that dream cracked the first Christmas I spent with the Martins. It started with the stuffing. I asked politely if there'd be any gluten-free options. Joanne, my mother-in-law, gave me a look that made my stomach twist. "Oh, I didn't realize allergies were trendy now," she said with a smile so sweet it made my teeth hurt. The whole table laughed. Jake squeezed my hand under the table, but said nothing. That first year, I brought my own Tupperware meals, hoping to make things easier. But the looks I got, like I was insulting her roast or acting too special, they never went away. She'd say things like, "A little gluten never killed anyone," or, "Just scrape the sauce off, it's fine." Shellfish? We're landlocked. You'll survive. Peanuts? Well, don't eat the pie, then. Dairy? Oh please, everyone's lactose intolerant these days. I never made a scene. I ate my own food quietly in the corner of the table or just picked at salad. Jake apologized later, told me Joanne meant well. "She's just old school," he'd say. "She thinks allergies are new age nonsense." But it wasn't nonsense when I broke out in hives after accidentally eating shrimp-laced pasta at Easter. Or when I threw up in their guest bathroom after biting into a gluten-filled roll labeled safe. That time, Joanne just shrugged and said, "I must have mixed up the baskets." Oops. I began dreading holidays. Not just because I was excluded, but because I felt erased. I'd offered to bring dishes everyone could eat, but she'd wave me off. "We have plenty of food already." Translation: your food isn't real food. Then came last year's Thanksgiving. I'd spent all night making a small, allergy-safe butternut squash risotto for myself. I labeled it clearly. Put it in a separate dish with a sticky note that said Sarah's only. I even placed it at the far end of the buffet to avoid any mix-ups. 10 minutes into the meal, it was gone. Gone. I stood there, holding my empty plate, scanning the crowd. Joanne was laughing with her sister. Jake's cousin wiped his mouth and said, "That rice thing was amazing, what was it?" I stared at him. "That was mine. I made that for me." "Oh. Sorry. No one told me." I turned to Joanne, expecting her to at least acknowledge it. She didn't even blink. "There's plenty of food, Sarah. Don't be so dramatic." Like I was a child whining about not getting seconds. That night, I ate a handful of lettuce and dry turkey while everyone else gorged themselves. I smiled through it. I even helped clean up. But in the car on the way home, I cried. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. Jake tried to comfort me, but he still didn't get it. It wasn't about the food. It was about dignity. About being heard. Seen. Respected. That night, I made a decision. I didn't say it out loud, but something inside me clicked. Next year would be different. After that Thanksgiving, I stopped pretending it didn't hurt. I didn't make excuses for Joanne's old-school mindset or brush off Jake's quiet apologies. I didn't cry in the bathroom or stuff my feelings down under a napkin. Instead, I let myself feel it all: every ache, every bite of bitterness, every lonely second sitting at a table full of people who didn't even notice I wasn't eating. Jake noticed, though. That night in bed, he rubbed my back and whispered, "Next year, let's just go somewhere. Just the two of us." But I didn't want to escape anymore. I was tired of shrinking myself to make them comfortable. Tired of hiding my food, my needs, my discomfort, so I wouldn't ruin the holiday. I didn't want revenge. I wanted something better. I wanted respect. So the next morning, I sent a message to the family group chat. Hey everyone! I'd love to host Christmas brunch this year. Super casual. Just coffee, breakfast stuff, and good company. Hope you can make it. The replies rolled in fast. Sure, sounds fun. I'll bring mimosas. Brunch sounds easy. Count us in. Even Joanne replied with a thumbs up emoji. They thought I was offering bagels and fruit. Something simple. Effortless. Forgettable. But I had other plans. Over the next few weeks, I signed up for an online culinary course focused entirely on allergy-friendly cooking. Gluten-free flours, egg alternatives, dairy swaps, nut-free substitutions. It was a crash course in making food that felt indulgent but safe. I started small: banana muffins with oat flour, cashew-free cheese sauce for pasta, dairy-free quiche with a crust that didn't fall apart. I failed. A lot. There was a week where my kitchen smelled like vinegar and disappointment. My buttery rolls came out hard as rocks. A batch of muffins collapsed in the oven and turned into soup. Jake came home one day to find me sitting on the floor with frosting in my hair and tears in my eyes. Is that a cheesecake? He asked cautiously. It was supposed to be. He didn't laugh. He just sat down beside me and ate a spoonful straight out of the pan. We've got time, he said. You'll get it right. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not even Jake knew the full extent. On weekends, I'd experiment for hours, adjusting spice ratios, testing vegan caramel glazes, hand-whipping coconut cream until my arms ached. I learned how to make gluten-free croissants that actually flaked. I built a cinnamon roll recipe from scratch that didn't rely on eggs or milk. I created an herb tofu scramble that could fool a brunch snob. I became obsessed, but in the best way. For the first time, food didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like home. Mine. By the time December rolled around, I had a full menu planned. Not just dishes I could eat, but an entire spread. Pancake stacks with fruit compote. Mini frittatas. Vegan sausage. Homemade jam. Coconut milk hot chocolate with peppermint whipped cream. My dream was to make it so good, no one would miss what wasn't there. I didn't tell Jake. I just told him to trust me. On Christmas Eve, while most people were wrapping gifts and watching holiday movies, I was prepping. Slicing, sautéing, labeling containers. By midnight, every surface in my kitchen was full, but nothing was cross-contaminated. Every ingredient was safe. Every dish intentional. I stood in the center of the chaos, wiped sweat from my forehead, and smiled. Tomorrow wasn't about proving anything. It was about finally showing them what it meant to care. That morning, I woke up before sunrise. I barely slept, but my body buzzed with nervous energy, the kind you get before a big test or a first date. I moved through the kitchen quietly, double-checking every label, arranging platters and warming dishes in the oven. I lined the counter with baked goods that looked like they belonged in a magazine: flaky, golden croissants, banana walnut muffins, and cardamom swirled buns, all gluten-free, dairy-free, and somehow beautiful. The house smelled like cinnamon and brown sugar and hope. I set the table with my best linens and mismatched plates, the only ones we had. I hung a cheap strand of twinkle lights over the window and stuck a sprig of rosemary in a vase as a centerpiece. It wasn't fancy, but it felt intentional. It felt like me. Jake came down around 7, hair rumpled, wearing a threadbare Santa t-shirt. He stood in the kitchen, eyes wide, and whistled. "Sarah, this is insane. It looks amazing." I tried to smile, but my stomach twisted with doubt. What if they hate it? What if Joanne says it's all fake food again? He reached out, took my flour-dusted hands, and squeezed them. They won't. But even if they do, this is for you. I'm proud of you. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. My doubts faded just enough for me to breathe. At 9 a.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. Jake's dad and his wife arrived first, carrying a tray of store-bought orange juice and a bottle of sparkling cider. I greeted them with a hug, ushering them in out of the cold. They stared at the spread on the table, eyebrows raised. "Wow, Sarah. This looks incredible," his dad said, sounding honestly impressed. Joanne showed up a few minutes later, arms loaded with presents and her signature two-strong perfume cloud trailing behind. She eyed the table, pursed her lips, and set her bags down. "Is this all homemade?" she asked, almost suspicious. I nodded. "All from scratch." She raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but didn't say anything more. Jake's sister and her husband arrived next, then the cousins, a couple of family friends. By 10 a.m., the house was full, louder and warmer than it had ever been. I served coffee, poured cider, and watched as plates started to fill. At first, there was hesitation. Someone quietly asked, "Are these regular eggs?" Another pointed at the pastry and asked, "Wait, these are gluten-free?" I just smiled and told them to try everything and let me know what they thought. To my surprise, the silence didn't last long. Soon, people were reaching for seconds. The croissants disappeared first, followed by the mini frittatas and the berry compote pancakes. Jake's cousin said, "Mouthful, Sarah, these are better than the ones at that bakery you love." Joanne picked at a muffin, then took a bite, paused, and went back for another. She didn't say anything, but I noticed her quietly finishing the entire thing. The whole time, I hovered refilling platters, topping up drinks, trying not to hover too obviously. But inside, I was shaking. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for a cutting remark or a joke at my expense. But it didn't come. Not yet. When everyone finally sat down together in the living room, plates piled high, Jake's dad raised his cup. "To Sarah, for making the best Christmas brunch we've ever had." I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in months. But I knew the real test was still coming. After the first round of brunch, the mood in the house shifted from polite curiosity to genuine enjoyment. Laughter filled the rooms, and for the first time at a family holiday, I didn't feel like I was watching from the outside. I was right in the middle, refilling the cinnamon rolls, showing Jake's niece how to whip coconut cream until it formed soft peaks. Even the kids, notorious for turning their noses up at weird food, were scraping plates clean. Joanne, though, was hard to read. She stuck close to the kitchen, helping, but mostly watching. At one point, she caught me checking the temperature on a tray of vegan quiche and whispered, "You really did all this yourself?" "Every bit," I said, forcing myself to meet her gaze. She didn't smile. Just nodded and moved on, but there was something different in her eyes, a flicker of calculation, maybe even respect, but also something sharp and unsettled. I wondered if she sensed the shift, how the family's attention was drifting toward me, how they were praising my food, not hers. Jake caught me watching her and squeezed my shoulder. "You're doing great," he mouthed. We moved on to dessert, warm apple crisp with coconut ice cream, chocolate chip blondies, and a platter of tiny lemon tarts, all free from every ingredient that had ever made me sick. I had spent weeks perfecting the textures, the flavor balance, even the way the crusts crumbled under a fork. Everyone raved. Jake's sister asked if she could take a few blondies home. His uncle cornered me to ask how I made the apple crisp taste buttery with no actual butter. The kids begged for seconds. I couldn't stop smiling, relief, pride, and something more. Vindication. Then came the question I'd been both dreading and hoping for. Joanne, of all people, set down her fork and asked, just a little too loudly, "Sarah, what kind of flour did you use in these croissants? They're so light." The room went silent. Even the kids paused, forks halfway to their mouths. I looked at Joanne, then at everyone around me, my husband, his family, their friends, all waiting. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart race. They're gluten-free. Everything today is. No wheat, no dairy, no shellfish, no peanuts. All allergy safe, I said, voice steady. For a moment, nobody spoke. I watched the realization bloom across their faces, surprise, then confusion, then a slow dawning respect. Someone laughed, short and amazed. Jake's dad actually clapped. But Joanne's lips tightened. So, all this was special food? No wonder I have a stomach ache, she muttered. I half expected her to push her plate away. Instead, the rest of the family leaned in with questions. How did you get the croissants so flaky without butter? Wait, even the quiche was dairy-free? Sarah, can you send me these recipes? I felt Jake's hand slip into mine under the table. He didn't say a word, he didn't have to. His look said everything. Joanne watched, quiet and tense, as the family crowded around me, laughing, complimenting, asking if I'd host again next year. It was the first time I'd seen her speechless. And for the first time, I didn't care what she thought. Not really. I was surrounded by people who finally really saw me, and it was enough. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. It already had right in the middle of my own living room, in front of the entire family. My hands still trembled a little as I cleared plates, but inside, something fierce and unbreakable was starting to settle in my chest. The brunch didn't end right away. In fact, people lingered longer than they ever had at Joanne's gatherings. The kids camped out on the rug, trading bites of lemon tarts and showing off new toys. The adults refilled their coffee, talking about everything from work stress to old family vacations. Every so often, someone would wander back to the kitchen and marvel at the spread again. Are you sure this is gluten-free? They'd ask, half in disbelief, grinning as they reached for seconds. Jake's dad kept coming back to the croissants. Sarah, I don't know how you did it, he said, shaking his head. I always thought this allergy stuff was, well, you know, not real food. But this? This is better than any brunch I've had in years. Each time someone complimented a dish, a small weight I'd carried for so long started to lift. I caught glimpses of Joanne in the corner, watching, arms folded tight across her chest. She'd force a smile if anyone looked her way, but she was quieter than I'd ever seen her, adrift, almost, in a house that was suddenly no longer hers to control. At one point, she tried to offer a little jab, half under her breath, well, I guess fake food's not so bad if you have low standards. But it barely landed. Jake said, fired back with a laugh, Joanne, you ate 3 muffins. Maybe Sarah should give you the recipe so you can keep up next time. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. It was all out in the open now. Jake came up behind me as I wiped the counter, wrapping his arms around my waist. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. I closed my eyes for a second, letting myself actually believe it. Cleanup was easy with so many hands pitching in. I found myself chatting with Jake's cousins about travel, about food, about how hard it is to feel included when you're the different one in any family. One of them confessed she'd always felt anxious at big gatherings, too, and thanked me for making something she could eat without fear. As the afternoon sun slanted across the table, the last batch of coffee brewed and people began to gather their things, there was a different energy in the air, lighter, more open. Someone even suggested that we should rotate hosting next year, but honestly, Sarah set the bar pretty high. That caught Joanne off guard. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Well, we'll see, she said, her voice brittle. I watched her watching me, and for the first time, I felt, not triumphant, exactly, but settled. Joanne's opinion still mattered, but it no longer defined me. I had shown what was possible when someone is actually seen and included. When the door finally closed behind the last guest, I leaned against it and let out a deep, shaky breath. I'd done it. Not just the food, but everything that mattered. And I wasn't going back. When the house finally quieted, Jake and I stood in the kitchen, both of us exhausted in the best way. The counters were covered in empty platters and half-empty coffee mugs, crumpled napkins and streaks of jam. But my heart felt light, almost giddy, with the way the day had gone. I sat on a bar stool, letting myself replay every moment. I thought about the looks on everyone's faces as they realized they'd eaten an entirely allergy-friendly meal. How no one complained, how they'd even asked for seconds and recipes. I'd spent years feeling like my food, and by extension, my needs, were a burden. Today, that changed. Even if it was just for a few hours, I wasn't the odd one out. I was the one they admired. Jake flopped next to me, grinning. Did you see my dad's face when he found out about the croissants? I thought he was going to start crying. I laughed, feeling a surprising warmth toward his family, yes, even the ones who'd once mocked my made-up allergies. It felt like a bridge had been built over years of silent resentment, with food as the planks. As we loaded the dishwasher, my phone pinged. A message from Joanne. Thanks for hosting. Let me know if you need help with leftovers. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cold. Just neutral. Which, for Joanne, was practically a peace offering. The next day, Jake's sister called. Sarah, I just wanted to say thank you. I never realized how much stress you must have felt all these years. I brought some of your blondies to work, everyone loved them. Seriously, you need to send me that recipe. Maybe we could do brunch at yours again next time? There was a pause. I could hear her hesitating, choosing her words. And I'm sorry for, not sticking up for you sooner. I should have. That apology meant more than she knew. I told her I appreciated it, and we made plans to meet for coffee soon, just the two of us, no group dynamics. Jake's cousin texted, too, those muffins were life-changing. Who knew gluten-free wasn't cardboard? It wasn't lost on me that most of these little moments happened privately. In a group, the old pecking order was slow to die. But in private, one by one, they were acknowledging what they'd missed. They were choosing, even if quietly, to meet me where I was. But I was most surprised by Joanne. 3 days after brunch, she called. The conversation was short and awkward. I just wanted to say, the brunch was nice. You put a lot of work into it. It showed. I thanked her, but before I could say anything else, she added, I suppose I could try that flour you used sometime. Maybe you could show me. It wasn't quite friendship. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a start. I hung up feeling a strange, buoyant peace. For the first time, the holidays didn't feel like a test I was doomed to fail. I changed the dynamic not by arguing, not by demanding, but by quietly, relentlessly insisting on respect. And now, even Joanne had to reckon with the difference. January rolled in with gray skies and cold mornings, but something in me had shifted for good. In the weeks after Christmas, little things began to change. Jake's sister started texting me for advice on substitutions when baking for her own daughter's school party. Jake's dad sent me a photo of his attempt at gluten-free pancakes, burned, lumpy, but made with pride. Even a few of the cousins, who'd always just shrugged off Sarah's allergies, began checking in before family get-togethers. Is this safe for you? Anything you can't have? Each message felt like another brick in a wall that had finally started coming down. Joanne, of course, remained herself. She didn't become warm or effusive overnight. But the edge in her voice softened, if only slightly. At Easter, she called me before planning the menu, her version of an olive branch. I'm making my usual ham, but I'll skip the breadcrumb crust. You can bring those rolls again, right? It wasn't quite inclusion, but it was acknowledgement. A sliver of respect. Most surprising of all was how I felt lighter, stronger, finally at home in my own skin. Hosting that brunch didn't magically erase the years I'd spent feeling invisible or belittled. It didn't rewrite every awkward moment, every time I'd gone home hungry or humiliated. But it gave me proof that I could take up space, set boundaries, and be loved not in spite of my differences but sometimes even because of them. Jake noticed, too. He became more vocal when someone slipped up or made a thoughtless joke. It's not hard to be considerate, he'd say, and nobody rolled their eyes at him anymore. Our home felt more like a haven than ever, filled with laughter, shared meals, and dishes that belonged on any table. There were still tense moments, family politics, old habits, unspoken resentments that clung to the edges of every gathering. Joanne never apologized for the past, and maybe she never would. But I learned I didn't need her approval to belong. My worth wasn't measured by what she thought of my food, or me. That next Christmas, when everyone filed into our house again, this time by popular demand, there was a new kind of energy. Less suspicion, more curiosity. People asked questions, wanted to help, wanted to learn. And when Joanne stepped inside, she paused, looked at the table, and gave a small, stiff nod. "You outdid yourself, Sarah," she said quietly. I smiled and handed her a plate. "Help yourself." For the first time in years, I felt not just tolerated but chosen. Not an outsider, but a host, someone they trusted, admired, and, in their own imperfect way, respected. I realized then that sometimes, the quietest acts of self-respect can become the loudest kind of change. And that was enough.